10 random magic cards rated. Day number 188, everybody. We are closing in on 200, if you can believe it. Let's look at the first card of the day. It's going to be Panar, Console of Revival from Mom Aftermath. This is 2 mana, a red and a white for a 2/3 legendary human artificer. Thopters you control have haste. What a line of text. Whenever you play a land from exile or cast a spell from exile, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. This is a card I have a fair amount of love for in Standard, even though I don't really play much of it anymore. Maybe we should try it again. It's been like, God, 6 or 8 months since I've tried Panar in Standard, and we had to have gotten some stuff since then, right? Come on. So this is okay. I will say this deck like 5-0'd some leagues when Pia first came out, right? And then just quickly disappeared into the ether, the nothingness. So I fear that this card is actually not that great, but a fun commander to build around for sure, with an incredibly, unique ability. You just don't get this every day. She's very cheap to play. She doesn't die to shocks. Altogether a solid Magic card, especially in terms of casual commander. So I will give Panar a 4.7. I don't think this quite gets there. I really don't. You have to build your entire deck around it, and even then the ability's not that great. So, we'll just kind of give it a slightly sub 5, but I do think it's a decent Magic card, Arcane Lighthouse from Commander 2014 here. This is a land that taps for a colorless and comes into play untapped. I'm on your side already, Lighthouse. You can pay 1 and tap it until end of turn. Creatures your opponents control lose Hexproof and Shroud and cannot have Hexproof or Shroud. I remember this thing. It's good. Just altogether a decent little utility land, right? A good argument for just putting more lands in your commander deck. Just watched a couple of videos about this recently, and they make very, very cogent points. And I'm not going to belabor those points. Just to say, forever ago, I saw Brad Nelson say, perennial Standard Magic player, pro player from back in the day, and to an extent, still in the modern times. But anyway, Brad Nelson, who I respect, said, if you're trying to cut a card from your deck, or if you're trying to, add a card to your deck, you don't know how to make your deck better, basically. Add a land. Cut a card, add a land. Almost always makes your deck more consistent. And even though I hate flooding, and I do it all the time on Arena, at this point it's like a meme how often I flood on Arena. I still think, especially in Commander, that when you have more, card draw engines and stuff that you're setting up, I think adding more lands to your deck is just almost always a net positive. And this is the kind of thing that it's a land that taps for mana, but it's also a very, very good utility ability when you need it. And when you don't need it, it's a land that taps for mana. You know what I mean? What's the real opportunity cost of putting this in your deck? Fairly low, right? So I'm going to give Arcane Lighthouse an 8. No, I'm not. I'm going to give it a 7.9, and the only reason I'm bringing it down like that is because it only taps for colorless. You know what I mean? Sand Golem is up next from Mirage, and only Mirage, but again, as I've said so often this week, not part of the reserve list. That's usually because it kind of sucks. And I remember this card sucking a little. This is 5 mana for a 3/3 artifact creature. It's also a golem. If a spell or effect controlled by an opponent causes you to discard Sand Golem, put Sand Golem from your graveyard into play at end of turn with a +1/+1 counter on it. Okay, so this doesn't suck, actually. This is the first creature like it. If I remember correctly, right? Unless, Su-Chi do something like this? I don't think so. But yeah, Obstinate Baloth right now does this in Standard, and there's been a couple of creatures that actually we have 2 creatures like this in Standard because we got a reprint from Lorwyn block in Foundations. It's like Wiltleaf Liege or something like that, and it does this as well. So it's actually a pretty slick ability, but it's extremely narrow. It's so narrow. And all you're really going to get is a 4/4, but you get it for free, if they cause you to discard this with Hymn to Torak or something back in the day, then you get a 4/4 for free. What a pretty good tech against him, So I'll take it. I'm going to give this a 3.2. And of course against discard decks, it's suddenly a 9. You know what I mean? Magnetic Snuffler is a It snuffles caps, all sizes, and it really, really works. This is 5 mana for a 4/4 artifact creature. It's a construct. When it ETBs, return an equipment card from your yard to the battlefield attached to Snuffler. Whenever you sack an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Snuffler. So, does stuff for equipment decks, does stuff for, clues, treasures, food, whatever, those kind of decks. But at 5 mana, it's priced out of being a real Magic card. Like a metal anteater with a trash can glued to its snout. Weird. Trash can lid glued to its snout. Never really paid attention to the art for this card. As a matter of fact, this is much cuter. This art is way cuter. Although robots with hair, robots with any kind of hair, it's like weird to me. It's very disconcerting to me. Kind of want to get off this card. I don't know why this bothers me, but it always does. Anybody down there in the comments section also feel put off by like robots that have hair or fur or whatever this is? It's just something about it is very strange to me. Anyway, this is bad, but not terrible. 3.8. No, I'm going to give it a 4. I'm going to give it a 4 because there will be a day. There will come a day where they print the correct equipment for this card and it like rules Pioneer or like something, you know what I mean? So if they print exactly the right equipment, the card is absolutely stupid. And yeah, it can wear a Colossus hammer pretty easily. There's things to do with it, but yeah, who cares? Up next is Aquaris Dent. Ooh, de Cicatriz Dentada. Okay, I can do that better. Aquaris de Cicatriz Dentada. All right, so this is from Lorwyn originally. It's actually Jagged Scar Archers. 3 mana, 1 and 2 green for a star elf archer. Jagged Scar Archers' power and toughness are each equal to the number of elves that you control. You can tap it and it deals damage equal to its power to a creature with flying. God, I miss you. This is such a sweet card, dude. I tried to force elves a little bit before I just caved and played fairies in Lorwyn. Lorwyn Standard. This is probably, I've said this a bunch of times, so you already know it, but Lorwyn Standard is the block that, Morning Tide, Eventide, all that. Lorwyn block was the block that I dedicated the largest percentage of my time ever in my history playing Magic to competitive play. I play a lot of competitive Lorwyn, and I tried to force elves. Nath, the Gilt Leaf, and just the Imperious Perfect back then. And it wasn't great. I'd say the best card in that deck back then was, I forgot its name, but the 3-drop elf that when it comes into play, it deals damage to your opponent equal to the number of elves you control. That thing would just win games outright a lot of the time. And it was in Golgari. It was like 1 green black to play that card. I love that thing. Jagged Scar Archers I would play in the sideboard of that deck against fairies. It's supposed to be fairy tech. The problem is it almost never resolves against fairies. And even if it does, it's usually like a 2/2, which can blow up other fairies, but can't blow up like Mistbind Click. And I know I'm getting very specific to Lorwyn Standard here, but that's because that's the most... I've actually played this card. that's the only context I've played it in. But I do think that in, the world of Commander, this looks pretty good, when you're playing Elf Ball and you've got, I don't know how many elves, 40 elves, like realistically, like 7 elves, right? Is that a realistic number? I think it is. But even if it's like 4 elves, and you have a 3-mana 4/4 that can blow up most flying creatures, which you just don't have access to. It's like a royal assassin at that point for flying creatures. It seems okay. I like this card. If you can't tell, I really like this card, but I've talked enough about Lorwyn Standard. It's way too much time devoted to one card. I got to get off of it. So I'll give Jagged Scar Archers a 4.5. And I mean it. I really think this is very worthy of evaluation in Commander if you're playing elves. And a lot of people are. White Knight, originally printed in the long ago. Let's look at the revised one. Let's look at a black bordered one too. Look at that gorgeous Magic card. Absolutely pretty. But White Knight is a pretty simple card, all things considered. Just 2 white mana for a 2/2 knight. It's actually a human knight nowadays with pro black and first strike. Crazy. So good. Even by modern standards, I feel like if they printed this, it might see some play. We've seen the newer versions of these, right? The one that costs 1 and a white. It has hexproof from black and first strike. It's 2/1 if I'm not mistaken, but it may be a 2/2. And those don't see all the play in the world, although, just so you know, that the modern day version of White Knight that we have available in Standard actually wears a Sheltered by Ghosts really, really well. You throw a Sheltered by Ghosts on that thing and take like one of their good permanents, and then they can't go for the Throated or cut it down for the rest of the game. Sheltered by Ghosts plus the new version of this guy. I'm telling you, give it a shot in Standard. But I'm going to give White Knight the honorary 5. I fear that by modern standards, this might not be a 5 anymore, although that's debatable. I also don't think it's much higher than a 5, so like a 5.3 at the absolute most, which means that I might be giving the honorary 5 to a card that just deserves a 5 anyway, which is what I think in some ways is sometimes the best use of it, right? So 5 for White Knight. Love this dude. Next is Dragon Throne of Tarir. Good card. Printed in cons here. 4 mana for a legendary artifact. It's an equipment. You can equip it for 3. Equipped creature has Defender and 2 tap. Other creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X till end of turn, X being this creature's power. This was not playable back in its old standard, which I hate. I was trying to find the right word. I do strongly hate that, actually. It's a very strong term, but I did. I would play a one of this in a few decks back in the day. And actually do some work at it, with it at F&M. For all the talk of Lorwyn Standard and how much competitive play I did during that, maybe the most F&M play I ever made or ever did was during, sort of Ravnica, Gatecrash, Dragon's Maze Standard, on into, Cons of Tarir, Fate Reforged. And it really made me want to start the channel, right? Because I was doing a lot of F&M play at the time. Really getting back into Magic. And Dragon Throne was a one of in a couple of sort of aggressive decks that I built, and it was actually really good. If you have a 3-power creature and a bunch of other creatures, and it turns out Dragon Throne just gives all your creatures +3/+3 till end of turn. And Trample is really important on this too. So this is a card that I have a fair amount of love for, and I do think it's an underrated commander card. Especially with some of the stuff we have now. What was that? Dimir has a 2-mana 8/8 now. Ancient one or something like that, and even though that creature can't attack unless you have a certain amount of cards in your graveyard, whatever, it's an 8/8. So it wears a Dragon Throne really well. Do you want all your guys to get +8/+8 in trample till end of turn? It doesn't matter if that guy can attack or not, right? It doesn't matter if he has Defender. Who cares? So there's tricks. There's tricks with Dragon Throne. I like this card. I'm gonna give it a 4.8. It's a little expensive, and you still have to equip it, and yada yada. All those things apply. All the reasons I don't like equipment apply to this card, but I still, I don't know. Take a look at it. Reef Pirates from Homelands is up next. We got a Homelands card, everybody. 3 mana, 1 and 2 blue for a 2/2 zombie pirate. It says summon ships here. It's actually a zombie pirate. Whenever Reef Pirates damages any opponent, take the top card of his or her library, put it into his or her graveyard. So they mill a card when it deals damage. Notices that this is, again, I have to point this out again this week. This is damages. Any damage. Not just combat damage, any damage whatsoever. So that's kind of cute. And you could probably do some fun stuff with it, but it's not good. This is not good. Cool art by Tom Wannerstrand here. I will throw a 1.2 on this. I'll give it a 1.35, and that extra 0.15 of a point there, that mostly comes from if you can give it the ability to deal 40 damage. if you can somehow deal 40 damage to somebody, you'll kill them with Reef Pirates. Let's say 10. Let's say somehow you can do 10 damage with it, right? And you can mill them 10. Maybe it's cool. It's still pretty bad, isn't it? It's still not very good. This is Exert Influence, though, next from Battle for Zendikar. That set wasn't even in Standard that long ago, and I don't remember what this is. 5 mana, 4 and a blue for a sorcery with Converge. Gain control of target creature if its power is less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast. Exert Influence, so it's just Sunburst. I remember everyone saying that when this ability came out. What's the difference exactly? So, a control magic that is always worse than a control magic. More or less, no matter what. Well, not necessarily, because control magic can be disenchanted, whereas this can't. That's a big difference. Things like Dominate and Rite of the Machine, right? Control magic effects that can't be destroyed, right? For whatever reason, are typically better. But that said, this is still not amazing. So I'm going to put, it's still gain control of target creature. That's it's not bad, right? So 3.6 on this. And final question mark card of the day is Feldon of the Third Path. This is originally printed in Commander 14. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 red for a 2/3 legendary human artificer with a sick beard. You can pay 2 and a red and tap him to put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of a creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, sack it at the beginning of the next end step. Sick. So just cast Shallow Grave every turn, but also get an artifact for whatever reason. Huh. Oh. Oh, and the way this works, you can just copy the same creature over and over. Huh. What's the Judge gift card look like? Oh, exactly the same. All right, cool. This guy looks like old Saffron Olive. Or old me. Not sure which one. I don't think my hairline will still be that intact by the time I get this much gray in my beard. It's not, as a matter of fact, as we speak. Unless I get a hairpiece, I don't think I'm going to be looking that good anytime soon, sadly. This is pretty slick. Sneak attack, shallow grave with a creature every single turn, and it can be the same guy. And the commander only costs 3. It's not bad. It's really not bad. Ask the audience. I haven't asked the audience in at least 3 days. So ask the audience, what do you give Feldon of the Third Path? And I'll give you a little extra time before I really get to rating this card, because I think it's kind of a tough one. It's got the unique commander ability, and in this case, I think it's actually more than just unique. It seems really powerful, too. Red has plenty of ways of pitching or discarding, right? Huge creatures, and really good creatures. You know, Drakaseth Maw of Flames, for whatever reason, came to mind. And if you copy that every single turn, then you're dealing God knows how much damage, all things considered. But there's got to be better targets, obviously. It was the first one that came to mind. But I think that this is like a 6, right out of 6. Maybe it's higher than that. It's very exploitable, but you know, you have to pay 3 mana for the activated ability. You have to give him haste to actually do it straight from the command zone. He's pretty killable, you know, so if you have to wait a whole turn cycle to actually use him, your opponents can do everything from bolt to cut down to like the right tragic slip, or you know what I mean. Like there's plenty of ways to get rid of this dude. So I don't mean to say dies to removal. I just dies to removal on top of lots of different removal, on top of, you know, his activated ability costing not a lot. I mean, it's not a lot, right? But I feel like if you play him on turn 3, like let's say turn 2 you discard a monster. Turn 3 you play Feldon. You make it around to your next turn. Turn 4 you probably spend your entire turn using his activated ability and not doing too much else unless you have like soul rings or whatever. So I don't know. I still think a 6 is probably about right there, but let me know if I'm like way off and he's actually a 7.6 or whatever he is. He's obviously a pretty powerful commander, but that is all I've got for now. I think that I will be doing our next 10 cards rated live on twitch.tv/SBMTG. So, that's going to go on the YouTube right after I get done doing it. So you won't miss it if you're not on the Twitch stream. But I think I will be doing it on the Twitch stream. So if you want to be live for it, check out twitch.tv/SBMTGDev. Follow over there. I'll go live every Thursday, except for Thursday, February 6th. Let me just put it that way. I'll go because I've got something to do that day that I already know I have to do. And it's very important. You're going to like it. But either way, I go live every Thursday about 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And when I go live next on this Thursday, tomorrow, as you're watching this, if you watched it in order, I'll be doing this. So if you want episode 189 live, come check us out and play some Magic with us and all that. But either way, I will see you all on the morrow. I love you very much. I'll catch you cats later. Bye.